The martial arts gym was buzzing with noise that afternoon. Young men and women were stretching, sparring, and laughing as the sound of fists hitting punching bags echoed through the hall. It was a place full of energy, sweat, and pride. In one corner, a group of students were gathering around a tall young fighter who wore a shiny black belt around his waist. He was known in the gym for his speed, his confidence, and his habit of showing off in front of others. He liked the attention he got whenever he performed strong moves or gave advice, even if that advice was not always kind. He enjoyed being the star, the one others admired. On that day, while he was laughing with his friends, the gym door slowly opened. In walked an older black woman who did not look like she belonged there. She wore simple clothes, nothing like the flashy sports gear the others had on. Her hair was tied back in a plain bun, and she carried herself quietly, as if she did not want to disturb anyone. She did not speak to anyone, she simply looked around the gym with calm eyes. Most people ignored her, assuming she was someone's relative or perhaps a cleaner who had come by mistake. But the black belt fighter noticed her and decided to make her the target of his jokes. He smirked and turned to his group. "Hey," he said loudly enough for everyone to hear, "maybe she wants to fight me. Should I challenge her?" The students around him laughed. They thought it was funny because the woman looked so ordinary, so fragile compared to the young fighters. They could not imagine her stepping on the mat with someone like him. The black belt, fueled by the laughter, raised his voice even more. "What do you say, ma'am? Want to spar with me? Just for fun?" His tone was mocking, but he kept a smile on his face as if he were being polite. The gym chuckled again, expecting the woman to wave him off and leave quickly out of embarrassment. Some students even covered their mouths, trying to hide their laughter. But to everyone's surprise, the woman turned her head slowly, looked straight at the black belt, and said in a steady voice, "All right. Let's spar." The laughter stopped for a moment. The group blinked at her, not sure if she was serious. The black belt himself looked shocked, then grinned. "Really? You want to fight me? Okay, but don't say I didn't warn you." He looked around for approval, and his friends encouraged him, cheering him on. The woman, however, did not smile or joke. She simply walked toward the mat, her steps calm and deliberate. Whispers began spreading around the gym. "Is she crazy?" one student whispered. "She'll get hurt," another muttered. Some of the kinder students frowned, wondering if this was going too far. The black belt was young, strong, and trained. This woman looked like she might be in her late 50s or early 60s, with no obvious signs of strength. Still, she showed no hesitation. She placed her bag down on the side of the mat and removed her shoes. With graceful hands, she tightened the plain belt around her waist. It was not a martial arts belt, just a simple cloth belt holding her clothes. Then she bowed slightly to the mat, a gesture that shocked a few who recognized it as a respectful martial arts tradition. It was a detail many ignored, but for those who noticed, it hinted that maybe this woman was not a stranger to the world of fighting. The black belt rolled his shoulders, stretched his neck, and strutted onto the mat. "Don't worry, everyone," he called out. "I'll go easy on her." His words made some laugh again, but not as loudly as before. There was a strange feeling in the air now, a mix of humor and curiosity. Something about the woman's calm face made people uneasy. As the two stood facing each other, the coach of the gym stepped closer. He was not sure if he should allow it, but the woman had already agreed, and the black belt seemed eager. He sighed and nodded. "Fine. But keep it safe. No full power, understand?" Both nodded, though one nodded with arrogance and the other with quiet dignity. The moment stretched. The black belt bounced lightly on his feet, smiling as though this was just a show. The woman stood still, her hands by her sides, her breathing even. Students gathered around, some with phones ready to record, others leaning forward in anticipation. The room grew quieter, the sounds of punching bags fading as more people turned to watch. Inside, the black belt felt certain this would be over quickly. In his mind, he imagined himself making the woman stumble with a single move, everyone laughing again, and his pride growing larger. He thought it was going to be the easiest spar of his life. The woman, on the other hand, carried no such thoughts of proving herself or humiliating anyone. Her face was unreadable, her eyes steady. The coach raised his hand and then lowered it, signaling the start. The black belt stepped forward with a playful jab, meant to scare or amuse. But the woman did not flinch. She simply shifted her feet slightly, her stance now firmer, balanced, and ready. For a second, the black belt felt a flicker of confusion. He had seen that stance before from experienced fighters, not from outsiders. The students watching leaned closer, sensing something unusual. The laughter had stopped completely. No one spoke. The only sounds were the soft shuffling of feet on the mat and the rhythmic breathing of the two opponents. The moment that began as a joke was quickly transforming into something else, though no one yet knew what it would become. And in that tense silence, the gym waited. What was supposed to be a funny, harmless moment now carried the weight of something far more serious. Everyone's eyes were on the older woman, wondering who she really was and why she stood so confidently in the face of a young black belt. The stage was set, and the joke had become a challenge. The black belt gave a quick grin and moved his shoulders as if loosening them up. He was still confident that this was going to be a simple match. The older woman stood across from him, her expression calm, her eyes steady. She was not smiling, not nervous, not even restless. It was almost as if she was waiting for something that only she understood. The crowd around the mat leaned closer, whispering among themselves, some still thinking it would end quickly, others beginning to feel unsure. The young fighter bounced on his toes, making small movements with his hands to show his readiness. "Don't worry," he said loudly, "I'll go easy." His friends chuckled, but the sound was not as strong as before. The air in the room had changed. It no longer felt like everyone was waiting for a joke to play out. There was tension building in the silence. The woman stepped forward slightly, sliding one foot in front of the other. Her movements were smooth, practiced, and controlled. It was the kind of movement that comes only from training for years. The students watching did not miss it. One of them whispered, "She knows something." Another student frowned, "That's a real stance." The black belt did not hear them, he was too focused on proving himself. The coach gave a small nod, and the sparring officially began. The black belt threw out another playful jab, expecting her to step back. But this time she tilted her head just enough for the punch to miss and stayed rooted in her spot. The crowd gave a collective gasp. It had not been luck, it was precise timing. The black belt blinked, surprised, but laughed it off. "Not bad," he muttered. He tried again, this time stepping in with a little more force. She moved her body sideways, letting the strike slip past her. Again, it looked effortless. The black belt's smile faltered for a moment. He had expected clumsy movements, maybe even panic. But instead, she moved with ease, as though she had seen the attack before it even came. The whispers in the crowd grew louder. "Did you see that? She's fast. No, she's smart. She didn't even use power." The gym was beginning to realize that something unusual was happening. The black belt decided to stop playing. He shifted into a more serious stance, lifting his guard, tightening his steps. His body language changed from mocking to focused. He charged forward with a combination of strikes left, right, a quick kick aimed at her side. The woman raised her arm and blocked with perfect form. Then she stepped in closer, her hand near his shoulder, not hitting him, but showing she could have landed a blow if she wanted. Gasps echoed across the gym. The black belt pulled back instantly, shaken by how close she had gotten. He had not expected her to be this sharp. He forced a laugh, trying to cover his unease. "You've got some moves," he said, but his voice lacked the confidence from before. The woman said nothing. She adjusted her stance again, her eyes fixed on him with patience, as though she was studying him. Her silence was more powerful than any words. It was as if she was reminding him that this was not a game, not a joke. The black belt lunged again, this time faster, more aggressive. He wanted to show his power, to put her on the ground and end it. But the older woman flowed like water, her movements quick and efficient. She dodged, pivoted, and parried each strike, never breaking her calm rhythm. The sound of his effort filled the gym. Heavy breaths, sharp steps, fists cutting through the air while she remained quiet, her breathing controlled, her posture steady. Every time he tried to land a strike, she was already a step ahead. It was like she was reading him, predicting his next move. His frustration began to grow. Sweat formed on his forehead, while the woman seemed as composed as when she had first walked in. The crowd, once amused, was now captivated. The students who had been laughing earlier were wide-eyed, some with their mouths open in disbelief. One whispered, "She's better than him." Another added, "She's teaching him a lesson." The laughter had completely disappeared from the room. Now there was only silence, broken by the sounds of sparring. The black belt, embarrassed, tried to regain control. He pulled back and circled her, breathing harder than before. He raised his voice, "All right, let's see what you can really do." But the words were more for himself than anyone else. He needed to convince himself he still had the upper hand. The woman shifted her feet again, her hands light but firm, her body relaxed. It was the kind of posture only a true martial artist carried. Those who practiced long enough could see it clearly. This woman had experience, and it was deep. He came at her once more, delivering a high kick with all his strength. She leaned back just enough for the kick to miss, then tapped his leg lightly with her foot as it came down, knocking him slightly off balance. It was not a strike meant to hurt, just a reminder that his power meant nothing if his balance was weak. He stumbled for a second, and the gym fell into stunned silence. The black belt clenched his fists, his pride burning. But at that very moment, he realized he was in a fight he could not take lightly. The woman's face showed no pride, no arrogance, only focus. That calmness was what unnerved him the most. He realized she was not here to prove herself to anyone. She was simply showing him what true martial arts meant. The students exchanged glances, their respect for the older woman growing with every second. Some began to feel embarrassed for having laughed at her earlier. The lesson was already becoming clear to them: respect was not something earned by age, appearance, or flashy moves. Respect came from skill, wisdom, and dignity. The black belt hesitated for the first time in front of the crowd. He took a slow breath, his confidence shaken, his mind racing. Who was this woman? Why did she move like a master? Why had she accepted his challenge so calmly? Questions filled his head, and with each unanswered question, his certainty crumbled. Around the mat, the gym grew quieter and quieter until the only thing anyone could hear was the pounding of the black belt's heart and the steady breath of the woman who stood before him. The crowd leaned forward, knowing the fight had shifted. What had started as a joke was no longer funny. It had become a test, one that the young fighter was losing without even realizing how. And in that moment, the gym was silent, waiting for what would happen next. The gym was silent now, so silent that every breath and every shuffle of feet could be heard clearly. The black belt stood with his chest rising and falling quickly, sweat dripping down his face. He had entered the spar thinking it would be a funny show, a way to entertain his friends and prove once again how great he was. But now, he felt the weight of many eyes watching him with a different kind of attention. The older woman had turned the room from a place of laughter into a place of awe, and she had done it without raising her voice, without showing anger, and without throwing wild strikes. She had done it with calm movements, patience, and control. The young man tried to shake off the growing unease. He told himself that he was still the black belt, the skilled fighter, the one with strength and training. But when he looked at the woman standing across from him, he could not deny that she seemed untouched by fatigue. Her breathing was even, her posture perfect, her eyes sharp but steady. She was not here to prove herself. She was simply here, ready for whatever came next. The crowd leaned forward as the black belt circled her again. He lifted his hands, moved side to side, trying to find an opening. He wanted to end this, to land a strike that would remind everyone he was still the strongest in the room. With a burst of speed, he lunged forward, throwing a series of punches aimed at her chest and shoulders. His fists cut through the air, fast and heavy. But the woman moved with an elegance that shocked everyone. She shifted her feet lightly, angled her body, and each punch missed its target by inches. She did not back away, she stayed close enough to control the space. The young man's fists met only air, his body working harder with every attempt. His frustration grew, and he pressed forward with more force. But then it happened, a single moment that silenced even the whispers in the gym. The woman lifted her arm and deflected one of his punches with a gentle but precise block. In the same movement, she stepped into his space, twisted her wrist, and suddenly his balance was broken. His own momentum carried him forward, and she guided him with ease, making him stumble. He caught himself before falling, but the message was clear. She had complete control over the fight, and she had shown it with only a light movement. The crowd gasped loudly. No one laughed anymore. Instead, they stared in disbelief. They were watching something rare, true skill, the kind of skill that came only with years of practice and deep understanding. The black belt's face turned red. His pride was wounded, but deep inside, fear began to grow. How was this older woman doing this? How did she see every move before he made it? He thought of all his years of training, the long hours, the sweat, the effort he had put into earning his black belt. Yet here he was, struggling against someone he had mocked only minutes earlier. He tried again, this time changing his style. He lowered his guard slightly, testing her reaction. He threw a sudden kick, then shifted into a punch. But the woman flowed with his rhythm, her body bending, twisting, and countering with minimal effort. She did not strike him hard. She did not humiliate him. But she blocked every attack and always positioned herself in a place where she could have ended the fight if she wanted to. The students watching began to whisper again, but this time their words carried respect. She's incredible. She's not just good, she's a master. Did you see that? She didn't even use force. The whispers grew, and the young man could hear them. They cut into his pride more deeply than any strike could. He pushed himself harder, determined to turn the tide. His movements grew faster, his strikes sharper, his kicks higher. But the harder he tried, the clearer it became that she was in control. She used his energy against him, guiding him with small taps, redirecting his strikes, making him chase shadows. He was sweating heavily now, his arms growing tired, while she moved like calm water flowing around rocks. At one point, he aimed a powerful punch toward her chest, certain it would land. But at the last second, she stepped aside and lightly placed her hand against his back, sending him stumbling forward. He caught himself, breathing hard, his eyes wide with shock. The crowd erupted in another round of gasps. Some students even clapped without thinking, amazed at her skill. The coach, who had been silent until now, folded his arms and nodded slowly. He had seen many fighters in his life, but it was clear this woman carried experience beyond what anyone had expected. He muttered under his breath, "This isn't just sparring anymore. This is a lesson." The young black belt could feel his strength draining. His pride was still pushing him forward, but his body was betraying him. His arms felt heavy, his legs slower, his breathing ragged. Across from him, the woman stood as if she had just started, her face calm, her breathing steady. She had not shown any signs of exhaustion. The gym was so quiet now that it felt like the entire building was holding its breath. Everyone's eyes were locked on the mat, waiting to see what would happen next. The young man threw one last desperate attack, a spinning kick meant to end it once and for all. But the woman read it the moment he turned his body. She stepped aside smoothly, caught his arm as he landed, and with a quick twist, guided him down to the mat. He hit the ground with a thud, not hurt badly but completely defeated. The woman stepped back immediately, giving him space to rise if he wanted. She did not gloat. She did not celebrate. She simply stood there, calm and respectful, as though nothing unusual had happened. The crowd was frozen in silence. The sound of the young man hitting the mat still echoed in their minds. Slowly, the reality sank in. What had begun as a joke had turned into something unforgettable. An older woman, underestimated because of her age and appearance, had just silenced an entire gym filled with fighters. The black belt lay on the mat for a moment, staring up at the ceiling. His pride felt broken, his body tired, but more than anything, his heart was heavy with confusion. Who was this woman? Why had she accepted his challenge so calmly? And how had she just humbled him in front of everyone with such grace? He sat up slowly, breathing hard, his eyes on her. She met his gaze with no anger, no mockery, only quiet strength. For the first time in a long while, he felt something he had forgotten as a fighter: true respect. Around the mat, the students exchanged looks of wonder. They had witnessed a moment that none of them would ever forget. The lesson was clear: real strength did not always show itself in muscles, belts, or loud confidence. Sometimes, it was hidden in plain sight, waiting for the right moment to be revealed. And so the gym remained silent, every person holding on to the same thought: something extraordinary had just happened before their eyes, and it was only the beginning of what they would learn from this plain, older woman who had just shown them the true meaning of martial arts. The young black belt pushed himself up slowly from the mat, his breathing heavy and his pride stinging. The sound of his fall still echoed in the gym, and the silence afterward was unlike anything the students had ever experienced. Dozens of eyes were fixed on him, but even more were fixed on the older woman who stood across from him. She was composed, not even a strand of hair out of place, her breathing steady and calm. She had not mocked him, had not smiled, had not tried to show off. She simply waited, her body language telling everyone that she was not there to humiliate anyone. She was there to teach a lesson, whether they understood it yet or not. The coach stepped closer to the mat, his arms folded, his face serious. He had been watching every move carefully, and in his heart, he knew exactly what he had just witnessed. He had trained fighters for years, seen champions rise and fall, but the level of skill he had just seen was rare, too rare to belong to someone who had walked in off the street by chance. His eyes narrowed slightly as he studied the woman. Meanwhile, the black belt stood fully now, his chest rising and falling. He bowed his head, not out of respect at first, but because he needed a moment to collect himself. His pride had taken a heavy blow, and he struggled to find the words. His friends, who earlier had cheered him on, were now silent, avoiding his eyes. None of them wanted to laugh anymore. The room had shifted from amusement to reverence. The woman stepped forward, her movements still graceful, and bowed respectfully in his direction. It was a small gesture, but it made the young man's heart tighten. She had just defeated him, yet she offered him respect. That kind of humility was something he had not expected. He hesitated, then bowed back, though his pride still ached. One of the younger students, unable to keep silent, spoke up. "Ma'am, who are you?" His voice was filled with awe, the kind of awe one feels when standing before something greater than they can understand. The woman looked at the student, then at the coach, then at the black belt who had challenged her. Her eyes were warm, but steady, as if she was deciding whether or not to share the truth. She finally spoke, her voice calm and clear. "I used to compete. A long time ago." The students blinked, waiting for more. She continued after a moment of silence. "I trained in martial arts for many years. I traveled. I taught. I fought in championships. That was another life. I don't fight anymore. I came here today just to watch, just to see the energy of young people learning." Her words hung in the air like a revelation. Some gasped softly, others whispered. Competing. Teaching. Championships. Suddenly, her movements and skill made perfect sense. She was not just some older woman off the street. She was someone with a history, a story they had not imagined. The coach nodded slowly, as if confirming what she said. "That explains it," he said quietly. "Your form, your timing, it's the mark of a master." The black belt's face flushed again, this time not with embarrassment, but with realization. He had mocked a master. He had laughed at someone who had achieved what he could only dream of. The weight of his mistake hit him harder than any punch ever could. The woman looked at him directly. "You are strong," she said gently. "But strength is not everything. Martial arts is not about showing off or making jokes at others' expense. It is about discipline, respect, and humility. Those are more powerful than fists or belts." Her words pierced him deeply. He swallowed hard, the truth settling in. He thought of how he had carried himself in the gym, boastful, loud, mocking others to earn attention. He thought of how he had treated her when she walked in, assuming she was weak because of her age and appearance. Now, standing before her, he realized he had been blind. The students nodded, their young faces reflecting the lesson too. Many of them had looked up to the black belt as a symbol of skill and strength, but now they understood something deeper. True mastery was not in how high you could kick or how fast you could punch. True mastery was in control, patience, and respect. The coach placed his hand on the black belt's shoulder and spoke quietly but firmly. "You needed this lesson. Remember it well. This is what martial arts is truly about." The black belt lowered his head again. "I'm sorry," he said, his voice low but sincere. He looked at the woman. "I disrespected you. I shouldn't have. I thought," he trailed off, unable to finish his sentence. The woman gave a small smile, not mocking but kind. "We all make mistakes. What matters is what we learn from them." Her words were simple, but they carried weight. The gym remained silent, the students absorbing every syllable. It was no longer just a sparring match. It had become a moment that none of them would forget. The black belt slowly stepped back, his body tired, his pride humbled. For the first time, he felt something he had not felt in a long time: grateful. Grateful that she had not crushed him to make a point, grateful that she had instead chosen to guide him, to remind him of what it truly meant to be a martial artist. Around the room, students began to clap softly, not for a victory, but out of respect. It was not the kind of applause that came from entertainment, it was the kind of applause that came from witnessing a truth, from being part of something real. The black belt closed his eyes for a moment, letting the sound wash over him. He knew that from this day forward, he would never look at martial arts or at people the same way again. The coach finally spoke to the class. "Let this be a lesson to all of you. Never judge someone by how they look, by their age, or by what you think you know. Respect everyone who steps onto the mat. Because you never know, you might be standing across from a master." The students nodded, their eyes shining with respect. The older woman bowed once more to the coach, to the black belt, and to the students. She did not stay for praise, did not boast about her past. She simply collected her bag, put on her shoes, and walked calmly toward the exit. But the silence that followed her out of the gym was filled with reverence. The black belt watched her leave, his chest heavy but his spirit awakened. He whispered to himself, "I'll do better." It was not just a promise to himself, but a promise to the art he claimed to love. And so the revelation of who she was and what she represented changed not only the young fighter but the entire gym. From that day forward, they would carry the memory of the plain older woman who had walked in quietly, accepted a challenge, and left them with a lesson that no amount of training could ever teach. The heavy doors of the gym closed softly behind the older woman, but her presence lingered in the air like an echo. Everyone stood still, some with arms folded, some with hands resting at their sides, but all with wide eyes and thoughtful expressions. The sound of her footsteps had faded, yet her lesson was still alive in the minds of every student who had witnessed what had just taken place. The energy in the gym had shifted completely. Where once there was laughter, light-hearted mockery, and playful arrogance, there was now silence, humility, and respect. The young black belt sat on the edge of the mat, a towel around his shoulders, his head bowed. His friends, who usually cheered him on loudly, stayed quiet, unsure of what to say. He was still catching his breath, his body tired, but his exhaustion was not only physical, it was also emotional. He had faced something he had not expected, defeat in its purest form. Yet this defeat felt different. It wasn't cruel, it wasn't humiliating in the way he had feared. It was almost cleansing. For the first time, he realized that losing could be a gift. The coach, who had remained mostly silent during the spar, finally gathered the students around. He cleared his throat and spoke in a deep, steady voice. "What you all saw today will stay with you. Remember it well. The belts you wear, the strength you show, the speed you train, it all means nothing if you do not carry respect in your heart." That woman did not defeat him with power. She defeated him with discipline, patience, and experience. And she did it without trying to embarrass him. That is true martial arts. The students nodded slowly, their eyes lowered in respect. Some whispered to each other about how graceful she had been, how every move seemed calculated, how she had done more by moving less. They were inspired, but also humbled. Many of them realized that they too had judged her when she first walked in, thinking she was out of place. Now they felt ashamed of those quick thoughts. The black belt lifted his head. His face was red from the spar, but his eyes were clearer than before. He stood up and faced the group. "I owe all of you an apology," he said quietly, but his words carried through the silent gym. "And I especially owe her one. I let my pride get the better of me. I saw her and I judged her. I thought I was being funny. But she showed me the truth. I don't deserve this belt if I don't act like a real martial artist. From now on, I'll do better." The coach gave him a long look, then nodded. "This is the beginning," he said. "Not the end. You learn more from losing than from winning. And today, you learned one of the greatest lessons." The students clapped softly, not out of entertainment, but out of respect. For the first time, the applause wasn't for strength or flashy moves, it was for growth, humility, and the reminder of what martial arts truly meant. As the days passed, the story spread through the gym and beyond. New students came in, curious about the tale of the plain older woman who silenced a black belt. Some dismissed it as an exaggeration, but those who had been there knew the truth. They had seen it with their own eyes, the way she moved, the way she controlled the fight, and the way she carried herself with dignity. The black belt changed, too. He no longer strutted around the gym with arrogance. He trained harder, not to impress others, but to improve himself. When new students joined, he greeted them with respect, no matter how inexperienced they looked. If someone made a mistake, he corrected them gently instead of laughing at them. His friends noticed the change, and slowly, they too began to follow his example. The lesson had touched all of them. One evening, weeks later, the coach gathered the students again. He told them something that made their eyes widen. "Do you know who she was?" he asked. They leaned forward eagerly. He nodded slowly. "Her name is well known to those who studied martial arts deeply. Years ago, she was a national champion. She trained students who went on to compete internationally. Some of her teachings shaped the very style we practice here today. She didn't tell you all of that because she didn't need to. She let her actions speak. That is why she is a true master." The students gasped. Some whispered her name, trying to recall if they had heard it before. Others simply sat in awe, realizing that they had witnessed history walk through their doors. The black belt felt a lump in his throat. The shame of his earlier arrogance weighed on him again, but it was now mixed with a sense of gratitude. He had been given a chance to face a legend, to learn directly from her, even if only for a short time. Few fighters ever got that opportunity. He made a silent vow to honor her lesson every day on the mat. From that day forward, the gym changed. The laughter was still there, but it was no longer mocking. The training was still hard, but it was no longer just about showing strength. The atmosphere carried more respect, more patience, and more humility. Students reminded each other of the lesson when pride started to rise. "Remember the older woman," they would say, and that was enough to quiet any arrogance. The black belt's journey became different too. He still competed, still trained, but he carried himself with a humility that made others respect him more. His victories felt different now, not as chances to show off, but as steps in a long path of growth. And when he lost in tournaments, he bowed deeply, remembering that day when he himself was humbled. Years later, the story of the sparring match still lived in the walls of the gym. Students who hadn't been there heard it from those who had. It became part of the gym's history, a reminder passed down like a tradition. The lesson outlived the moment, shaping new generations of fighters. And the older woman? She never returned. She had not come for fame or recognition. She had only come to watch, to feel the energy of the place. Yet in that short time, she had left a mark deeper than any permanent scar. She had shown them that true power is quiet, humble, and full of respect. She had shown them that appearances mean nothing, and that wisdom shines brighter than strength. The young black belt, now older and wiser, would often think back to that day. He would remember the silence, the shock, and the moment his pride cracked wide open. But most of all, he remembered her calm face, her steady eyes, and the way she had bowed after defeating him. He carried that memory like a treasure, one that guided him every time he stepped onto a mat. And so, the lesson of that day lived on: never judge by appearances, never mock what you don't understand, and never forget that true mastery is not about showing off, it is about humility, respect, and the quiet strength that can silence even the noisiest of rooms. The gym had been left silent that day, but in the silence, everyone had heard the loudest lesson of all.